sir.
All right. Good evening. I'm Les Linebarger, Executive Director of Communications for Nacogdoches ISD. This is a special meeting of the NISD Board of Trustees conducted remotely using the Zoom app because of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. Today's open session is being recorded and will be shared afterwards on the district's YouTube account. I will now turn this over to NISD Board President Pam Fitch. Ms. Fitch.
Thank you, Les. Good afternoon. I hereby call this special meeting of the Nacogdoches ISD Board of Trustees by video conference to order. A quorum of the following board members is present. Pam Fitch, President. Vice President James Montoya.
Here.
Secretary Mindy Winslow.
Here.
Board Member Leah Beth Abt.
Here.
There you are. Board Member Farshid Naramand.
Present.
Thank you, sir. Board Member the Reverend James Irvin was unable to attend. Board Member Dr. Tyrell Groman and Superintendent Dr. Gabriel Trujillo are at the NISD hybrid graduation ceremony at the current time, but they will be joining the meeting shortly. They expect to wrap up around 5:30, 5:45, and will be joining us then. On March the 16th, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings laws to the extent necessary to allow video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus pandemic. In accordance with those suspended rules, we certify the following. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. Although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference. We are meeting by use of Zoom software, which allows two-way public communication for members of the public. As we would at any in-person meeting, members of the public who've registered to speak during public comment will be given the opportunity to do so. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board-adopted procedures to the extent practical. An audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. If you have questions about these suspended laws, please call the Office of the Attorney General at 888-672-6787 or by email at toma@oag.texas.gov. The first item on our agenda tonight was public comment. However, we have not received any requests to address the board tonight. So we will move forward. And I'll just remind everyone that the purpose of today's special meeting is new board member orientation and is for discussion purposes only. No voting will take place. And I will welcome everybody tonight. We appreciate your participation. I'm going to cover very briefly and quickly here two items: that's school board responsibilities and board operating procedures. The main function of the school board is to provide local citizen governance and oversight of education. The operation of the school district at the local level is a shared responsibility of the school board and the superintendent. In Nacogdoches, we've adopted the mantra, team of one, meaning we're a group of individuals working together for a common purpose. Local school board responsibilities can be grouped into 5 categories. Number 1, adopt goals and priorities and monitor success. Number 2, adopt policies and review for effectiveness. Number 3, hire and evaluate the superintendent. Number 4, adopt a budget and set a tax rate. And 5, communicate with the community. So during tonight's meeting, we're going to dive deeper into each of these 5 areas and learn a little bit more. Board operating procedures, we spent board some time on this last week, so I don't necessarily feel like we need to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but did want to open up the floor for any additional questions or thoughts if you've had anything since our discussion last Thursday. All right.
I
Oh.
don't know. Okay, I got your email, Pam, and this is not the time for me to address any changes, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we'll do
Okay.
that at our workshop. We'll do
Okay,
that.
great.
Absolutely. All right. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is legal guidelines and issues. I invited Ms. Kelly Krachevsky to speak to us tonight a little bit, not specifically getting into the details of open meetings specifically, because we all have to do that training and understand that, but to talk about it in a little bit more of in light of board member communication and what legally we need to be aware of. Kelly, please hit things like the reply all and those type of subjects, as well as social media. Kelly, I'm going to kick it over to you. Oh, you're mute. You're on mute. Les, do we have her unmuted?
There she goes.
There she is, I think.
Try this again. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Jan.
Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to the NISD family, Miss Apt. I look forward to meeting you. As Ms. Fitch indicated, you will, of course, be required to take an Open Meetings Act training course. The easiest way to do that is through the online video that the Attorney General's office issues. And that particular training will go in depth into the Open Meetings Act. What I did tonight, I just kind of threw together a quick PowerPoint so that I was sure to cover kind of those before we sit down and do a real training. What are those gotta know now kind of things, as Ms. Fitch indicated, that particularly pertain to communications in between board meetings and what might get you into trouble and what are those areas of vulnerability. So Mr. Linebarger, were you able to put that together or just?
Yeah, bear with me just a moment here while I get it to come up.
And I'm going to go through this as quick as I can, but I'd rather you have too much material than not enough, so you can certainly print this off and keep and look back to it.
Bear with me just a second, Kelly, okay?
Go ahead and get started if that's all right with Ms. Fitch.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think the most important thing to keep in mind, and seasoned board members will tell you, is that the concept of the Open Meetings Act is transparency. And, you know, if you're ever going to have a question about application of the Open Meetings Act, if you just put your transparency goggles on, your John Q. Public goggles on to say, okay, if I'm a member of the community and I really want to be able to know why the Nacogdoches ISD School Board is making a decision to do X, is there enough of an opportunity for me as a board member, as a member of the community, to have sat through, listened, and access that information and be basically a educated voter and educated parent and community member. And so if there's ever a question as far as, you know, should we provide more specificity on an agenda, or should we talk about this in open versus closed? You always want to put those transparency goggles on and make sure that you're hitting both the legal aspects of the Open Meetings Act as well as just the spirit of the Open Meetings Act. And what you'll find, even from a legal perspective, is oftentimes the courts that have analyzed cases and actions of governing bodies will rule in favor of the community member because they feel like the board member's conduct violated the spirit, even if it didn't technically violate the language within the statute. One of the most common of those types of violations, of course, is what they commonly refer to as a walking quorum. And the basics of the Open Meetings Act is that the board, as Ms. Fitch indicated, can act only as a governing body. And you only do that when you meet as a quorum in the public under a properly posted agenda. Of course, now we have an exception because we are participating in conducting a meeting by Zoom. This is a new world we're all in. That's, you know, something that is a temporary suspension by the governor. So, you know, as a general rule, the board comes together and meets and acts only as a quorum under a properly posted agenda so that members of the community can participate and watch and see what you're doing in the light of day, so to speak. What you're not supposed to do is to conduct any type of business outside of those parameters, which typically would occur in between board meetings. And the most common violation has been deemed as a walking quorum or a daisy chain. And so again, those of you who have sat through numerous board meetings or board trainings have heard these phrases and have seen them used in different scenarios and have seen the prohibitions on walking quorums grow over the years. And the most common, of course, now that we're in the age of technology, is the email and the text messaging. Basically, a walking quorum is where the courts first recognized that you could have a quorum for purposes of the Open Meetings Act, even if you're not in the same place at the same time discussing public business. And so think of a scenario where maybe you have a board who's contemplating a settlement agreement in a personnel situation. And maybe you have one board member who, maybe the board president would call Ms. Winslow and say, hey, Kelly says we have an offer for 50 grand. Shall we take it? And Ms. Winslow provides her some feedback. And then Ms. Fitch next turns to Mr. Montoya. And she says, hey, Kelly says we have an offer for 50 grand. And if she does that enough times to where you have a quorum who have talked about public business, even though those were separate independent telephone conversations and the board members were not in the room at the same time, what the Attorney General has said and what the courts have said is that that constitutes either a daisy chain or a walking quorum. And so that is the most vulnerable place that we are in now that we interact and communicate with technology to the extent that we do. Whereas walking quorums used to occur only at the potato chip stand or by telephone, now we have to be concerned about walking quorums also occurring by text message. Also, another area of vulnerability, of course, is your emails. If you have a superintendent, for instance, who sends out a communication to board members, even one reply all could potentially be a deliberation of the board on public business. We also have social media comments and posts. When we have maybe someone post something related to school business on social media and one board member comment, and then, you know, ways down the comment string, another board member comments, and then a ways down the comment string, another board member comments, the potential exists there that you have a walking quorum because you're all making remarks and communicating and thereby deliberating on public business. Now, of course, in order to violate the act, the infraction is supposed to be an intentional act to, you know, circumvent the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And 9 times out of 10, it's not an intentional act to circumvent. It's usually just something that happens along the way without even realizing it. But because there are civil as well as criminal penalties, that's the one thing that we have to be most careful about right now is the walking quorum and making sure that if it's an item on the agenda, of course, that's the easiest way to identify what is and what is not considered public business. Is it on the agenda? Has it been on the agenda? Is there talk of putting it on the agenda? Is it an item of potential or current item of public business? you want to make sure that you're not talking about it either verbally or in electronic communication in between board meetings, for fear that you are inadvertently creating a daisy chain or a walking quorum. Now, we also have new legislation that came about recently in the last session that pertains not to the Open Meetings Act, but pertains to the Open Records Act or the Public Information Act, but will take those electronic communications and interpret them as government records. And so that's a second reason that board members are being told you have to be careful about communicating electronically regarding school business. In fact, at the beginning of the school year, Mr. Martin and others had to do extensive training with administrators because they use their cell phones so much in the conduct of just getting through the day and how they communicate with each other. And what the statute now says is that any school employee or official, such as a campus administrator or even a teacher, or especially a board member, if you have evidence of conducting public business on your cell phone or in your email, you become a temporary custodian of that basically government record or document. And it doesn't matter if it's a personal email account or if it's a personal cell phone device. In other words, the focus is on the content of the communication, not on the device and who owns the device, or what your intended capacity was when you were having those expressions or those communications. And so that's why, for the most part, a lot of districts have gone to these Remind 101 apps and other kinds of software programs that do not allow any type of back and forth dialogue, but rather it's just a popcorn shouting out of information, whether it's a coach providing information to a student or to the athletic director sending information to his or her coaches, superintendent sending information to board members, principals sending information out to employees. If you are able to just secure that in a software program, then that software program maintains those communications for you, and you are absolved of your responsibility as the recipient of that information from having to maintain it as a temporary custodian. However, if the administration is not using that type of software, and this is coming from an individual's personal cell phone, and they're sending a communication to you, and it's about public business other than, you know, clerical things. It wouldn't apply to something like what time's the board meeting tonight, but it would apply to, are we talking about the turf on the baseball field? That would be a matter of public business. And so if you're dialoguing on your cell phone, without regards to whether it's a walking quorum or not, if it's in communication with an employee, such as the superintendent, you become a custodian of that temporary custodian of that business record, and you have to maintain it just as if it were on a paper document. And what the statute basically says is that Mr. Linebarger, as the district's public information officer, if he were to get a public information request from an individual in the community saying, I would like to see all documents within the last 4 weeks, whether electronic or hard copy, that pertain to, we'll just use the turf on the baseball field again, that pertain to the placement of turf on the baseball field, then Mr. Linebarger would have to go and send communications out to every employee or official that he think might be in possession of any documents responsive, including text messages. So while the temporary custodian does not pertain specifically to the Open Meetings Act, Ms. Fitch, I think you would agree in prior discussions, it's equally as important, because you do use your cell phones on occasion for personal business, sometimes even without even wanting to. People contact you and people text you. And so you need to realize that you have an obligation to maintain those. If there is a dialogue, it is a matter of, and it is a matter of public business, then that becomes a public record, just like any email would or any record would in hard copy. Does that make sense?
Hey, Kelly. This is Les. I've got your PowerPoint up.
I can see that now. I don't know how to
Tell me what page you want to be on.
Huh?
What page do you need to be on?
I have no idea. I've just been rattling. I've got it in front of me though, and so I can just make sure I hit the high points, and then board members, like I said, if you want to be able to print it off, or I can email it to board members afterwards, and that way you have it as a resource. I think for the most part, you know, it's important that everybody understand that what we're doing tonight in meeting by Zoom is actually a temporary suspension of some very important provisions in the Open Meetings Act, and that likely will come to an end. I think it has a date of December 31, but it may come to an end sooner if the governor makes that decision. But generally speaking, we are supposed to be in the same room all together, and we're supposed to be talking about the items on the agenda, and we're supposed to be deliberating in such an extent and in such a degree that the members of the audience, whether they're watching via Facebook Live or they're actually sitting in the room with us, that they can understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. And I think that's, you'll find one slide that addresses the walking quorum, and a quote from the court in that case is that if everybody has all these kind of one-on-one conversations at the potato chip stand or by text or by telephone or whatnot prior to the board meeting, then when they get there and they actually vote, there's no discussion to be had. And if there's no discussion to be had, then the people of the community have no idea why Ms. Winslow voted the way she did or why Ms. Fitch voted the way she did. And it deprives the community of that transparency, which is the cornerstone of the Open Meetings Act. And so if you'll, stay true to, we're not discussing public business in between public meetings, then there will be a lot of discussion at the meeting and a lot of deliberation, which is the intent of having 7 board members coming from 7 backgrounds, is to bring all of that to the table and for you to be able to share your thought processes with all 7 of you together, so that the ultimate decision that's made is truly the best decision for the district, because everybody is benefited from hearing what everybody else has to say. And if you just have those little one-on-one conversations, then that's truly defeats the spirit of the Open Meetings Act. And so you definitely want to make sure that you always have in mind those goggles.
Kelly, before we move too far away from the text message, I kind of have a question. If we have a text message, if someone texts us on our personal telephone, you've said we're then a custodian of that record. How long are we required to maintain that record?
That's an excellent question. And basically you would be required to maintain it for the exact length of time that we would be required to maintain it based if it were a paper record. And so if it's, for instance, a parent who texts a teacher permission for her child to go on a field trip, then we would have to look up under the records retention policy, the field trip permission forms. And if it says 1 year, then that text message permission form would have to be maintained for 1 year.
Hey, Kelly.
It's all based on the actual records retention policy, and it's published on the Library and Archives Commission's website, and you would be surprised at all the different types of categories of information. So you just have to look at the subject of that dialogue, and it has to be maintained for that same length of time.
I have a question, Kelly. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hypothetically, I receive an email concerning an issue. However, my president did not receive that email as well. However, I called, I said, hey, have you received this email, and explain what happened? And I say, I really don't believe it's true. And he said, well, we think about it and we move on and go to the board. Is this a violation?
Did everybody hear the question?
I said,
Okay.
would we?
Okay. What you would be doing is, of course, if you just called the board president, that would just be 2 members. But if you had 2 other members, for instance, you're calling the board president, maybe 2 other board members received a similar email and called the board president as well. And so you never know how many other people have had the same calls. And so if the fact pattern is limited just to that transaction between the 2 of you and there were no others, then no, that's not a violation. It's only when the 2 are added to 2 more and it becomes a quorum. And then it's a walking quorum.
Okay, my question actually was pointed as says, I'm making a statement which I don't agree with it. In other words, give that information, however, state that I don't agree with it. That statement also plays a role.
Well, I think I would have to know more facts as far as what the email said. I think if anyone individually from the community, and your board operating procedures may speak to this, I'm not certain, but if anyone in the community reaches out to one board member and it's about public business and it has some kind of complaint, criticism, or request of the board, it would be appropriate to forward that to the rest of the board members so that the board as a whole can make the decision. Do I want to place this item on the agenda? Is there significant interest in this issue enough to place this item on the agenda, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of just two people or even let one board member to make that decision. People in your community aren't familiar with how your board operating procedures work. They're not familiar with how to get, a resolution to an issue of concern. And so sometimes they may reach out to just one board member. And so that's an excellent fact pattern for discussion of how should we as individual trustees handle a situation when we get an email or a communication from a community member and we're not certain whether it went to everybody. Certainly if it's a complaint or criticism, you're going to want to involve your superintendent and make sure that he's aware and familiar with and can handle it from an administrative perspective as well.
Next question I have is information you receive and you try to be a good custodian. However, your phone get lost, broken, or vandalized, or actually stolen. So what's the outcome of that?
I think you got to do the best you can with what you've got. And that's why many districts have gone to the Remind 101s and other types of similar software. I think Google has one where that software itself will maintain all of that communication for you. If it's emails, then if everybody's sending it to your school district Gmail account, then Mr. Linebarger has all that set up to where the Gmail server saves all of that and you don't have to worry about it. So it's really only those communications that are coming onto your personal phone that are not from a Remind 101 kind of scenario and coming from the outside that you have to be concerned with. But, I don't think the county attorney is necessarily going to come down on criminal charges the first time if you're not able to locate or if the device has been damaged or stolen. What you really need to be doing though is getting into the practice of, as these communications come in, identifying them as, okay, I think this would be an education record, and so, or a government record, and let me go ahead and maintain that now in the event that it could be requested at a later point in time. So either move that dialogue to a different forum that has the automatic storing capability, or screenshot it and save it.
Thank you.
Whatever you can do.
Thanks.
Any other questions right now? Okay. There is a slide in there, Ms. App, that'll tell you what the exceptions are to whether or not you actually have a meeting or you can either have a meeting or a gathering, and in either two of those scenarios, you've got the potential for deliberation and a violation of the Open Meetings Act. But if you do have, for instance, this is the time of year where you all in a normal world would have been attending all kinds of functions like graduation and things of that nature. And so when that happens, you're thrown into a social situation or even a district situation where you're thinking, oh my gosh, you're counting and you're saying there's 4 of us in the same room. Are we creating a quorum, and are we violating the act because we're here? And so there are some exceptions. It does not apply for informal or social gatherings or functions, any kind of state or regional training conference when you go to Dallas for TASB or Houston or Austin, any kind of ceremonies like, for instance, graduation or things of that nature where you are there. If there's discussion of school business that's just simply incidental to the occasion, then you're not violating the Open Meetings Act. And so you do have a slide on that. So not to be concerned. What I would be concerned about is if I saw you at maybe a town hall meeting, maybe you were going to hire a new superintendent or hire a new athletic director, and you had town hall meetings and you were shouting questions from the podium to, the search firm candidates, and there were 4 more of you in the room, then that could be an actual deliberation on public business, and that would concern me, and that would not be incidental to the occasion, but rather that would be the purpose of the occasion, is to deal with school business. So that would not come within an exception. But otherwise, when it's just incidental, when it's celebratory, or it's a workshop, or it's some type of social, you're fine. I've also given you, some quotes from cases that talk about the spirit of the act and compliance with the spirit of the act when in doubt. And then I really would like for you to look at the provisions regarding video conference, because that's what has been suspended for now. And typically what is required is for a quorum to be in one location. And it's designed for a situation where you have maybe one board member traveling on business and cannot be in attendance. And there are very specific notice requirements for how we would have to post that. And so the fact that those requirements have been suspended, want to make sure that you're familiar with and you understand that, so that in the future, when we are back to normal, we know what the requirements are for video.
Kelly,
Yes.
conversation that goes on behind closed door or executive session, they're not qualified for a Public Information Act, does it?
No. Well, yes and no, in the sense that the subject is, of course, on the agenda. And I think that, is an excellent question to take us into the notification requirements, which, again, it's all about transparency. And what the statute says is that we have to be specific enough in the subjects that are going to be deliberated at each meeting, sufficient to appraise the community members of, what the potential action is that you're going to be taking. And that notification requirement applies equally to closed session as it does to open. Of course, you don't have to be so specific on your closed session that you're actually giving away what you have been granted permission to discuss in closed meeting to begin with. For instance, if you were to discuss a settlement offer in closed session, we would not have to put on the agenda that you are going to discuss the offer of $40,000 to settle the X, Y, and Z litigation matter, but rather you would just have to put the X, Y, and Z litigation matter. For instance, if there was a heightened interest in that particular litigation, then you want to include the name of the litigation. If there's no heightened interest in the community to the litigation, nobody even knows that there's litigation pending, and maybe it's not even litigation, it's just an employee grievance, then you can be general with regards to, consideration of employee grievance, consideration of resolution of employee grievance. What the Attorney General has said is that we have got to be, the more specificity is required, the greater the interest. So, anytime we're talking about personnel issues, the Attorney General has said, we've got to be pretty specific. If you have your agendas in front of you right now, you can tell that, or an agenda from a previous meeting, you can tell that Nacogdoches, we don't just say discussion of personnel. I mean, it's very specific. It's going to be resignations, reassignments, dismissals, terminations, non-renewals. It's going to be, your verbiage is going to be far more specific based upon whatever the issues your HR staff are going to bring to you. If it's a grievance, it's going to say employee grievance. If it's a new hire, it's going to say a new hire. And if there's interest in the position, like a principal, an athletic director, a band director, then the Attorney General says we've got to be more specific, and we've got to put the title on the agenda so the community knows that you're contemplating the hire of a superintendent or a principal, or band director, or an athletic director, whatever might be of heightened interest in your community may be different than in another community. And so, you've got to look at that on a fact specific basis. But your notice is going to pertain to both, your notice requirement is going to pertain to both open and closed session. Once we go into closed session, however, in response to your question, Posh, is that you are bound by the Code of Ethics and by statute with regards to confidentiality of discussions held in closed session. So while your closed session agenda might say that you're going to discuss personnel recommendations, including reassignments and resignations and contract renewals, if you were to come out of closed session and either release the certified agenda that's kept by the board secretary, or even talk publicly about the specific, for instance, the superintendent may have made a recommendation to non-renew a particular employee's contract, and the superintendent may have laid out for you all the rationale and the reasons and the poor performance. And if you were to reveal the contents of those discussions, then that's a potential violation of at least the spirit of the Open Meetings Act, where you're going beyond the mere subject of the closed session and now diving into the actual dialogue and the whole rationale for keeping personnel matters confidential. So yes, it is a violation to reveal anything beyond the subject matter of the agenda based on things that you discuss in closed session. It's also, as I said, it's a code of ethics issue for board members, and it's a matter of trust. You know, you're creating a team of 8. And in order for you to work effectively, you have to be able to trust each other, that you're going to be able to talk openly and honestly about your opinions, and that information will not be revealed outside of closed session. And once that trust is breached, then it's a lot harder to regain that trust. And so it's a code of ethics, it's a board operating procedure, it's just good common governance that you'll hear as well, separate and apart from any legal concerns. Did I touch on your question, or did I talk about
yes, no, I know that as what goes inside the closed doors has to stay there. That's what my understanding is. I was not talking bringing those information outside or disseminating those information or touch it or give a hint. Just what goes on in behind the closed door has to be safe. In other words, if I express my opinion about certain things and someone else expresses about someone else and never goes out, however, somebody demands to see what was going on behind closed door, that considers a open act. Yeah.
Well, let me give you an example. I think, again,
Am I
there
clear?
are times when your HR staff may bring in documents into
Right.
closed session that you review. There are times where you may have a grievance hearing held in closed session. And for
Right.
instance, you know, the commissioner has made an exception for releasing the recording and the record of a student grievance hearing or an employee grievance hearing that's held in closed session. You can release it solely for the purposes of sending the record up to the commissioner, but it's not otherwise public. So we would still have to maintain the confidentiality of what is presented and discussed in closed session, even in record form, unless we have an exception like that, where, you know, if a person is to appeal what happened in the hearing process that occurred in closed meeting, we have to send that up to the commissioner, and that's been deemed not to be a violation of the act, but it's still confidential outside of, with the exception of just that format or that setting. So, you know, if we're in the boardroom and I say, okay, I need to collect up all these papers that we just discussed, it's because those documents would otherwise be confidential, and we don't want you to inadvertently release those by having them, you know, in your own folders and files. So is that closer?
Pretty close. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm Leah Beth Apt, and I'm the newest member and totally newbie here. And I think so far, I think I followed everything you said. I am extremely, though, unsure of what goes on in the executive session and what doesn't, so that we still have transparency with the community. And I have a feeling, though, that this is not the time for you to explain all that. Did Pam, did you say that there'll be a workshop on this, or that there is training that I could get that would explain this better for me?
Yeah, there will be. I did ask Kelly, that was one of the topics I did want to cover tonight, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
To our board
If
members.
Mr. Weinberger can find the slide, it looks like it's number 24.
Yep.
Is where we have the reasons for closed session. And so the
Yeah.
legislature has said everything has to be talked about out in the public unless it fits into one of these few limited exceptions. The most common, of course, is the personnel, because you are going to be one of the, you know, largest employers in Nacogdoches. So almost every board meeting, you're going to have some personnel action to take. So that includes appointment, employment evaluation, reassignment duties, discipline, or dismissal of the public officer or employee. It also includes your grievances. So all of that is going to be likely the vast majority of what you discuss. You did a whole lot last year under real estate. You know, anytime you have a bond election and you're purchasing property, you're going to talk about the offer, you know, that you're going to make on that property. That's the part that's confidential. And so the legislature will allow you to talk about the purchase of real property. And I've used settlement agreements a couple times as examples. So anything that has a legal bent to it, where if we were to talk publicly, it would violate the attorney-client privilege. And then that might be a reason to talk publicly or privately, I'm sorry, in closed session. Those are probably the most common. We do have level 3 parent grievances on occasion. We have discipline appeals, and those are often held in closed session as well. But the question is an excellent question, because just because the subject matter is right for deliberation, that doesn't mean the entirety of the dialogue is appropriate to be held in closed session. So, you know, for instance, you know, you could have situations where a portion of the dialogue might be protected by attorney-client privilege, but it's really more of a policy decision. And so the policy aspect needs to be discussed in open session. And so you really have to police yourself. And I will tell you, Ms. App, I think this board does a really good job of policing themselves on what is appropriate for closed session versus what needs to be discussed in open session. And trying really hard not to get it under that 1 hour mark, so that you stay on the agenda and boom, 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 that you're only talking about what absolutely has to be discussed in closed session to protect the privacy of your employees and your students. But you do have other things like security, test items, you know, things of that nature that are also appropriate for closed session. They're just not as common.
Okay, that makes sense. So,
and this board will keep a certified agenda as well that that pertains only to what is discussed in closed session. So it will have the subject, but it will also, you know, have, you know, just a little bit more information on the certified agenda than what you have on the regular agenda that goes to the public. So, you know, for instance, it might have the name of the employee, the actual, you know, amount of the settlement offer made, the amount of the offer made on the purchase of the property, so that you do have documented what the dialogue was about, so that if there ever is a complaint that you talked about something you shouldn't have, a judge could go in and he could open that certified agenda and make a determination as to whether or not you violated the act. Were you within the parameters of the closed session discussion? And it has to be, you know, specific enough on the agenda to allow. And there will be many times, like I said, when they police each other, they'll say, hey, this is outside the scope of the agenda. We don't have this posted. We can't talk about this. And so you just really do a good job of keeping each other in line.
right.
Kelly, along those lines, can you think of anything related to this most recent disaster, pandemic, COVID, that would be practical or fall under executive session?
You're going to have, you know, certain personnel issues, I would imagine, that are going to come up when it's time for everybody to return to work. And maybe there will be people who will be requesting the ability to stay home when they've been asked to return, and because of fear for some reason that doesn't fit within the new, you know, coronavirus Family First Response Act paid leave guidelines. And so there could be some personnel issues and some personnel grievances that come up where a district where the HR department has had to say no, or has you know, basically interpreted these new laws in a way that the employee may disagree with. So those will come up, I'm sure, in the fall. I'm hoping that there aren't too many student issues. I mean, I think that for the most part, the administration knows that that whatever kind of scenario they open with will have to be flexible and fluid, and and provide different opportunities for students who have different needs and abilities. So I think for the most part, we're seeing more of an employee-based concern. There are resources that I've given you on the back as well, just some additional. I've identified, of course, the penalties, but I've also given you, and I'll tell you, you're in a great county, John Fleming, you know, and he has helped me out several times with various different boards where if there's a concern ever expressed regarding Open Meetings Act, he's happy to come provide, you know, any kind of guidance, training. You're not in a county where they're anxious to prosecute anybody. They're all about training and help, and you know, how can we ensure that we're all on the same page and that we're getting the job done. So you can look at those penalties, but don't dwell too hard on them. I'd rather you focus your attention more on the resources, because that's, you know, TASB does an awesome job. I've given you their webpage. If you haven't looked at all their COVID resources, oh my gosh, they're amazing. And then of course the Attorney General's office, as I mentioned, you're going to go there to watch your videos, but they also update their handbooks and their other resources, and it's all free and it's all very easily accessible. And so there's no such thing as too much information. What else? What have I left out, Ms. Fitch?
I think you hit the high points I wanted to be sure to cover. What about you guys? Do y'all have any questions? Thoughts?
Just remember
Veteran
that
board members can chime in.
So remember, you're temporary custodians of public information, so be very careful about what is maintained on your own personal cell phone and email accounts, and always be cognizant of the walking quorum concept, and that put those transparency goggles on, and if it passes the transparency test, then you're good to go.
Kelly, really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to
Absolutely.
give us this tutorial tonight.
All right, y'all stay safe. I look forward to being with you again in person.
Okay.
I cannot wait till we actually get to all meet in the same room.
Absolutely. All right. Good to see you guys. Have a good
Thank
meeting.
you.
Hi, Kelly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right.
Hello, team.
Hi, Dr. Trujillo.
Hey, Dr. Trujillo.
We just had our last graduate walk across the stage, so I made my way to a theater room at the back of the stage.
All right. Give up on me here. I've just completely lost my place in all of this paperwork, but I do know that our next item on the agenda is talking about board policies, including the policy manual, and that's going to be Mr. Michael Martin. Are you with us, Michael?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Fitch. Board President and members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to allow me this afternoon to talk about your board policies. Mr. Linebarger, if you'll bring up that PowerPoint for me.
You see it there?
I do see it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next slide, please. All right, board district governance is a topic that we're going to focus on tonight. It is section B of your board book or your board policies. The district is bound by statute and agency rules, state and federal laws, commissioners' rules, UIL rules and regulations, limitations of state, federal, and foundation grants. Also, I forgot to let you all know that inside of your board book, I believe Ms. Anderson has placed the board member's guide to policy if you kind of want to follow along inside of your board book. Okay, Mr. Linebarger. The district is also bound by administrative regulations. State law names superintendent as the administrative manager. So the board passes board policies, and from those board policies, administration or the superintendent and administration to create regulations. The regulations we call administrative regulations, which include student and employee handbooks, grading guidelines, forms such as permission slips, and employment applications. So all of that would be found under our administrative regulations. Okay, Mr. Lombard. Here is just a snippet of your board policy online. This is provided as a service by TASB, Texas Association of School Boards. And looking at each section, you have A, which is the basic district foundations. Section B, which we're talking about tonight, covers local governance. Section C is business and support services. Section D is personnel. Section E is instruction. F is students. And G is community and governmental regulations. I put this screen on there as well to show you that your online policy has a search feature. So if you don't know exactly which policy or which one of these sections your question might fall under, you can do an advanced search over here to your left. Okay, Mr. Lombard. And also your board policy online can be found on the district's website. It is divided into different sections to major areas of operation. We've already kind of talked about that a little bit. Okay, your policies are divided into legal and local policies, which outline the mandates regarding governance issues. Legal policies contain statute, rules, and case law governing a particular topic. So the board approves local policies. Legal policies are related to the laws of the land or case law of the land. Okay, Mr. Lombard. The board has final authority to interpret the policies that govern the schools, and subject to mandates or limits imposed by state and federal authorities, has complete and full control of the district. The board's action shall be taken only in meetings that comply with Open Meetings Act. So you all voted or vote on policies in open session. You deliberate your policies in open session as well. To pass a policy, our board has elected 2 readings before the policy is in effect or considered passed. Okay, Mr. Lombard. Again, talking about the board interprets its policies. Administration, Ms. Karcheski talked earlier about how HR, she gave an example of how HR might interpret the policy differently than the board intended. And it may come to a grievance or a complaint that the board would eventually hear. So the board as a whole interprets its own policies. The administration does its best to enforce and adhere to those policies and to explain those policies, but the board as a whole has authority to talk and interpret its own policies. Okay. If employees, parents, or other members of the public bring concerns or complaints to a board member, he or she shall refer them to the superintendent or another appropriate administrator, who shall proceed according to applicable complaint policy. So we have 3 complaint policies adopted by the board. You have DGBA, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later on. You have FNG, local, and you have GF, local. When the concern or complaint directly pertains to the board's own action or policy, which there is no administrative remedy, the board member may request that the issue be placed on the agenda. Visits to a district facility. A board member shall adhere to any posted requirements for visitors to first report to the main office of a district facility. So if you're visiting one of the campuses, just like any other employee or visitor to the campus, the board has determined that you would stop at the school office to let the school know that you're on the premises. Visits during school or business days shall not be permitted if their duration or frequency interferes with the delivery of instruction or district operations. Okay, Mr. Lombard? Board member ethics, equity and attitude, trustworthiness and stewardship, honor in conduct, integrity of character, commitment to service, and student-centered focus. That is part of your BBF local board policy. Ethics prohibited practices, part of BBFB legal. Quote, public servant shall mean a person elected, selected, appointed, employed, or otherwise designated as one of the following, even if the person has not yet qualified for office or assumed his or her duties. An officer, employee, or agent of government, or a candidate for nomination or election to a public office. This is the definition of a public servant, which includes all of us. Then we have board policy BF local. Board policy within this context of the current law, the district shall be guided by board adopted written policies that are given appropriate distribution and are accessible to staff members, parents, students, and community residents. Again, going back to your board policies online, it is accessible to all of these members of the community. Harmony with the law, newly enacted law is applicable when it's first effective. No policy or regulation or any portion thereof shall be operative if it is found to be in conflict with applicable policy. So once a law is passed, it becomes enforceable on the date that the legislature has determined that it, or a court determines, or judge determines that it is effective. We don't have to wait for the board to adopt again. That would be a legal policy, and it would be effective usually September 1, or in some cases immediately. Adoption and amendment. Proposed local policies or amendments introduced and recommended to the board at one meeting shall not be adopted until a subsequent meeting. Again, going back to the board has elected to have 2 readings for a board policy to be considered adopted. Emergency adoption. The board took this action a few months ago with regard to some coronavirus COVID-19 issues that were of an emergency adoption. So an adoption for an emergency may occur in one meeting if special circumstances demand an immediate response. So you all do have that option, but only in emergency situations. Next, please, sir. Reports. By September 1st of each year, report to TEA regarding the number of requests submitted by a member of the board during the preceding school year for information, documents, and records, and the total cost to the district of responding to such requests under Education Code 11.1512C through F. That is policy BR legal. And again, they put that in several years ago. There were board members, not in our district, but other districts that were making a lot of requests of the administrative staff, and legislators decided to pass a law that we report these requests to TEA every year. Mr. Lombard, thank you. Okay, board policy DGBA. Again, this is a local policy adopted by the board. This policy is to help, this one particularly relates to employees of the district. an employee can make a complaint, and it begins at what we call level 1. The level 1 complaint is heard by the lowest administrator that can resolve the issue. If the issue is not resolved or does not satisfy the complaint, it moves to a level 2. A level 2 is the next level administrator, or usually the supervisor of the first level administrator. And a second hearing is held, and listen to the information by the complainant and issue a decision. Should the complainant not get the resolution that they had requested, they are then able to file what we call a level 3, of which then the board hears the complaint, usually in open or closed session. Mr. Weinberg? A different policy, F and G, I talked about it a little earlier. F and G is student rights and student or parent complaints or grievances. So if a parent has a grievance or a complaint or a student, this is the policy we follow for their complaint. It is very similar to DGBA with regards to timelines or specific timelines which must be met by your policy. And also it can go 3 levels or to a level 3 hearing before the board. And finally, we have a board policy GF local, which public complaints. Anyone in the community who has a concern or complaint can file a complaint under this policy of your board, your set of board policies. There are other complaint policies that I did not go in depth into, which include policy DIA local. It is more suited for Title IX or Title VII complaints or Section 504 disabilities complaints. There's also EF. Policy EF is a complaint policy that we would hear a complaint about instructional resources through. So those are your different complaint policies available to employees, students, parents, and also the community members that are available at any time. All right. Does anyone have any questions over Section B?
Mr. Martin.
Sir.
This is Coach Farshid. A time allowed to respond to each level. Is it something that this district set, or is something that TEA has set?
The board has actually set it, Coach Narimon. The board has set a 10 business day time limit to respond to the complaints. So each level or the administration has to respond in writing within 10 business days.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, if there are no more questions, if I may, President Fitch, want to go into department information.
Yes, sir, please do.
Thank you. On the screen, you have, we're going to start with Human Resources. This is Executive Director of Human Resources, Harold Whitaker. And you can go ahead and next slide. He has been with the district for a little over 7 years. Mr. Whitaker has done an excellent job with our Human Resources department. He has 5 employees who work with him. Cindy Burton, who is a specialist, Magda English, human resource specialist as well, Alma Lopez, Maxine Semank, who is our benefits coordinator, and Carmen Cano, our secretary, and also, or his secretary, and also the receptionist at the front desk when you all come here at the district support center. That's Miss Carmen, Miss Cano. Okay. Human Resources Department responsibilities. Mr. Whitaker contributes to the recommendation of sound policies directed toward improvement of personnel practices, coordinates orientation and trainings for programs for new teachers, administrators, and other staff, administers district program of employee evaluation, which we use T-tests, formerly known as PDOS. coordinates the district application and recruitment program and ensures that the district is represented in a positive and professional manner, makes recommendations regarding policies and procedures for salary, fringe benefits, and other personnel function, and directs the preparation and revision of job descriptions and classifications of positions. Contributes, responsible for the district-wide relations programs, including processing of complaints and grievances. Those complaints that we talked about in policy DGBA, Mr. Whitaker would serve as the second level administrator, usually in those type of complaints. Administers employment contracts and contract renewals, performs other tasks and functions as assigned by the superintendent. You will find that language in all of our job descriptions here at NAC ISD. Let's see, ensures that the employee handbook is compiled, updated annually, and distributed, and oversees the necessary processing for issuance and renewal of state certification and permits. All right, this past year, just a few things about recruiting. Attended 7 job fairs in the fall, 5 were attended in the spring. Job fairs, as you know, were cut short due to COVID-19. Some of them were held virtually. Mr. Whitaker attended a couple virtual job fairs, which he says is a fairly unique experience. It's like, I asked him, how was it? And he said, it's like being in a chat room. You basically wait there online until somebody enters your space or in your room before you can really talk to them. Whereas at a real job fair, at a physical job fair, we get the opportunity to step out there and shake hands with individuals who are walking by our booth, and we get to really represent Nacogdoches ISD in a positive manner. Some marketing strategies that they've tried this year in the HR is they have, I don't know if you've seen it on North Street, they've rented the electronic billboard. It's just east of College Street. This spring, they brought it up March 22nd through April the 18th. And also, I believe they're still displaying from May 18th to June 16th. And what they're displaying up there is basically our logo, our marquee, and the open positions that we have across the district. So you're going down North Street or up North Street, you look over at that billboard, and you can see Nacogdoches ISD's presence there, looking for applicants to fill the job vacancies that we have. Okay, some of the other recruiting and marketing tools used by Mr. Whitaker and the HR department are a local newspaper, Region 7 Job Fair, Stephen F. Austin's Educator Prep Program, Handshake, which is an online platform that various universities use to post, and school districts use it to post their positions with the higher education institutions. Texas Association of School Administrators, TASA, we post there quite frequently. Also on the right-hand column there, those are just some of the colleges and universities that the district, Mr. Whitaker, and some of the principals, we've started in the last few years sending principals to some of the job fairs. They know what type of individuals they're looking for, what type of applicant that they are looking for. So there are a lot of job fairs that instead of Mr. Whitaker attending, we send some of our campus principals who have vacancies on their campuses. Some of those colleges and universities include, of course, our own Stephen F. Austin State University, University of Texas at Tyler. This past year, I think Texas Association for Bilingual Education conference, we sent, I believe it was Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Salceda to that conference to recruit bilingual teachers. Texas State University has been a good college to try to recruit bilingual teachers as well. Texas A&M University, ETBU, or East Texas Baptist University, Sam Houston University, Lamar University, Texas College, Jarvis Christian College, Wiley College, Texas A&M Corpus, and Kingsville. A very long way down 59, but we stretch out as far as we can to try to recruit quality bilingual candidates back here to teach our students. And Region 7 and other service center job fairs are also attended. Just a couple of points of interest. The district currently has 1,036 employees, substitutes, about 200 active substitutes. Other duties performed by the Human Resources Department are fingerprint and background checks, student teachers and interns, recruitment and retention, and employee benefits. All right, the Transportation Department, Director of Transportation, Mr. Stacy Lampkin. He has an operations specialist, LaTanya Wallace, shop supervisors, Jason Williams, and dispatchers, Archie Fleming. Some points of interest here with Transportation Department: 70 employees, 58 buses, transport about 3,200 students daily, cover 225 square mile radius daily, 33 regular routes, 7 special need routes, manage rentals for the district any time that an administrator or a teacher needs a vehicle to go to a conference or go to some type of event that we don't have a vehicle for. Mr. Lampkin and his department set up the rentals through Enterprise Rental. They also do student field trips, UIL academic trips, athletic trips. The list just goes on and on. Facilities and Construction, Director of Facilities and Construction, Mr. Ralph LaRue. Cindy Robinson is his administrative assistant. Mike Haley is the supervisor of maintenance and grounds, and Mike Davis, the supervisor of custodial. Mr. LaRue manages 75 employees to include maintenance and grounds, HVAC, warehouse, custodial. Manages approximately 80 buildings, 1,300,000 square feet of buildings, 1,200,000 square feet conditioned space, and uses custodial services. That is a lot of real estate, folks. Manages new construction and maintenance, and some of his new duties as a result of COVID-19. We've asked Mr. LaRue and his staff to do some research and get us some quotes on portable wash stations, which we have acquired some, and also portable hand sanitizer stands. If you've been to the, I think up around the graduation or the high school area, you may have seen some of those here recently. So those are just a few things that Mr. LaRue and his staff have been looking at and working on here of late. All right. Technology Coordinator Mike Owens. Mr. Owens has a Secretary, Claudia Limon. Network Administrator or Manager, Art Humphrey. Computer Technicians, Eddie Garcia, Zach Simpson, Eric Forney, Keith Mims, and Stan Riley, who serves as a network specialist. Also has a help desk, Ray Vega. Ray takes all of our phone calls when we're in an immediate need across the district and helps us over the phone by remoting into our computers and supplying us with the appropriate service that our machine may have. Let me stay there just for a second. Just looking at technology, I also wanted to just kind of bring the board up to date where we are with a few things. As you all are aware, we had a malware attack back February, I believe the 11th. It was that we found out, and we have since contacted and contracted with Crispus through our insurance carrier. Crispus is a digital forensic services company, and they helped us with the decision to purchase Carbon Black, the program that you all approved for us graciously to help us to get these hackers out of our network. It has been a slow process trying to get everything back in order. And there are many, we still have systems that are not completely 100% back up. But I will say that this department has worked tirelessly to try to get things back in order, or at least back to where we were. We've discovered some security issues that we had to address along the way of rebuilding, basically rebuilding this entire network across the district. Crispus should be finished with their work. We should be getting a report to the superintendent here in the next week or so. We've also stepped out there and contacted and had our first meeting with a company called Gasaway and Associates, which is a computer or a digital consulting firm that we're going to be recommending come in and assist and mentor our technology team. Some guys who have a lot of extensive experience in the public school sector with networks, computers, tech plans. And so I think it is be a wonderful investment for the district to move forward and get Gasaway and Associates in here to help us move into the future with our networks. Okay.
Mr. Martin.
Sir.
I have a question. Let me find
Yes, sir.
it. It's on page 8, actually, on a DGBA local.
Okay, let me get there, Coach. Page 7?
Page 8, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And it says level 1 for employee complaints or grievances. On the level 1, it says complaint form must be filed 15 days of the date of employee's first new.
That's correct.
It means employees has to do 15 days or we have to respond to 15 days.
If an employee has a complaint, they have 15 days to file the level 1 grievance paperwork.
And we have 10 to respond.
Yes, and once they do that, once they have filed their complaint, the administration has 10 days to schedule a hearing and issue a decision.
And this is for all levels?
Yes, sir. This is for all levels. Unless, I'm sorry.
I was going to say level 3rd is the same, immediately respond to it and case is closed, correct?
Well, yes, sir, correct in that once level 3, usually it is closed. However, we can, in some cases, it's not possible to get the complaint and the hearing done within the 10 days that is set out. So what we do is in writing, we ask for a stay of the dates or the time frames. So if we can't make the time frame, let's say somebody filed a grievance during the day before Christmas break.
Right.
Again, going back to business days though, when we come back, it is going to be a little bit hard to get school started back, get students back. So we may ask for a stay on the date that we're supposed to have the hearing or that we are supposed to respond to the complaint.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. It is by mutual agreement though.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, police chief, police department. The police department, of course, everyone knows Chief Sandra Mary, I believe. She has a sergeant. We call him Sergeant Ram. Also, police officer Carolyn Meredith, police officer George Burns, police officer Chad Branton, police officer Jonathan Sowell, police officer Michael Brazil, and K-9 officer Pablo. Chief, the Nacogdoches ISD Police Department was authorized agency, which was formed by a resolution passed by the Board of Trustees in September of 1993. It receives its authority from the Texas Education Code. All NIC officers are commissioned by the state of Texas, and with all legal power and authority granted to them under the laws of the state of Texas. NISD police officers' jurisdiction is throughout the school district, which covers about 262.5 square miles. The department has a memorandum of understanding with the local Nacogdoches Police Department and also the Nacogdoches Sheriff's Offices on cases occurring on overlapping jurisdictions. NISD is currently comprised of the chief and the sergeant and the 6 officers, the K-9 unit. The police headquarters is located at 609 North Mound Street. The officers are housed on the following campuses: 3 police officers at Nacogdoches High School, a sergeant at Malcolm Rector Technical High School, an officer at Mike Moses Middle School, and an officer at McMichael Middle School. In the fall of 2020, an officer solely dedicated to the elementary schools, and we'll be launching a DARE program, Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, in the elementaries. The officer will be housed at the NISD PD Police Department. Let's see. The police department also manages our emergency operation plan. They conduct a lot of drills for us, evacuation drills, lockdown procedures, and prepare the district safety and security audits as mandated by the safety and security committees, which brings me to a point that we are having a safety and security audit. Right now, I think it is scheduled for September, the month of September, for this coming up school year. So Chief and her team will be coordinating those efforts with our auditor.
Mr. Martin.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm the one ask questions.
That's okay, Coach.
The truancy officers operating under the police department?
They do currently. Yes, sir, they do. I was coming to them next. As a matter of fact, we have 2 truancy officers who investigate students that exhibit frequent absenteeism. The officers monitor the attendance records of students who are identified as truant and attempt to ascertain the cause of the absences. This is accomplished by home visits, visiting the student at their assigned campus, and if necessary, filing truancy charges with the court. Chief also has a secretary or a telecommunication officer. Position is certified by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, TCOLE, and her duties are to dispatch police officers to calls for service via the police radio, schedules, and prepare travel orders for officers training to go to training schools, prepare schedules for extracurricular activities, compiles and submits timesheets, procures uniforms, equipment, and other supplies as needed. And I believe that concludes my departmental report. Any questions?
I'm just curious. You say the truant officers are through the NISD Police Department?
Currently, that's where they sit. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious why we don't have them under our, within our district.
No. They are within our district.
Mr. Montoya, that is something that I'm evaluating. And in the design and the structure that we do have, I feel that the truancy officers need to work a lot closer with our campus administrators, with our assistant principals and with our principals, and also with our social workers to make sure that we can all build something together. Law enforcement is in the business of enforcing when the law has been broken and things need to be in that direction. And and I understand truancy is in that, but I'm working along with the team to restructure some and make a little more alignment where we don't have it fragmented out. So I'll be coming back and giving you an update as far as what that may look like for, so you can see exactly how, what the team will be laying out for those services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, board.
All right, do we have any more questions
Engine
on this
and
section?
transmission system. Says push your blue all-star button and request a diagnostics check.
I couldn't quite hear that. Who was that?
We're picking up some voices, I think.
Yeah, all right. I don't want to move too fast. So any more questions on this section with the policies? All right. Hearing none, we will now move to the next item on our agenda, which is district goals and priorities. District planning is one of the most important tasks our board performs. It sets the course and keeps the district moving in a positive direction. And Dr. Hill, the floor is yours, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me correctly or appropriately? I hope. Great. Okay. Thank you, President Fitch, members of the board, and Dr. Trujillo. I appreciate this opportunity. So we'll start out with the PowerPoint I created over the weekend, just to kind of talk to us a little bit about our mission statement. And Mr. Linebarger, if you'll go ahead and go to slide 2. You'll see that just to kind of orient you to what I did, I kind of put the header, the narrative, and then I put the source always at the bottom of the slide, just so that you know from where I'm acquiring the information. So this, of course, came from our board policy, AE Local. And so our mission statement is the district will provide quality educational experiences for students to succeed in a competitive, diverse, and ever-changing society. As we move on to the vision statement, which is also included in policy AE, is to educate and inspire everyone to achieve excellence. And then lastly, contained in that policy is our educational philosophy, which this will take up 2 different slides. Our core purpose is teaching and learning. Every employee of the district plays a vital role in the educational process. All students deserve to be taught in a safe and secure environment. The participation of parents in the community is necessary for the district to succeed at its mission. And then lastly, you have high expectations for everyone. Students and staff are critical, engaged, energized, and ultimately successful district. So Mr. Linebarger, if you'll go ahead, there you go. So again, all of that information is contained in our AE local policy. Move to the next area of this, we have board adopted plans and goals. So as a part of the last legislative session, HB 3, House Bill 3, was rather large and encompassed many facets, if you will. And so this particular slide, the information came from the TEA website. TEA was generous enough to offer up some HB 3 in 30 videos of all the various components of HB 3. And so what this particular, whenever I hear board goals, my mind automatically goes to the HB 3. So it's a little different than what you guys did a couple of years ago with your Lone Star governance, which is contained in your board operating guidelines. However, the process seems very, very similar. So go ahead and go to the next slide if you don't mind, advance. You'll see that the format of the slide has changed, and that's because I took it directly from the PDF version of the HB 3 and 30. So that you know exactly what it says we're doing here regarding our board goals. And so basically you see that the state of Texas has released this 60-30 plan. And so basically it's establishing that a pre-K through 12th grade goal of at least 60% of proficiency at TEA's meets standard at 2 key checkpoints along the state's public pre-K through grade 12. And so basically these last 2 bullets is basically saying 60% of all students will meet the state's standard at grade 3 reading. And then 60% of all school seniors graduating without the need for remediation. So they need to have acquired an industry accepted certificate, enrolled in a post-secondary education facility, IHE, or enrolled in the military. If you'll go ahead and advance. So basically we need, and basically this is just telling us that we need 3 different goals. And so it's recommended that these goals are established locally or developed locally by us, and that we have to adopt them at a public meeting and that throughout the year, we update you on these goals. Again, very similar to what Lone Star Governance did with progress measures, if you will. Go ahead and advance, please. So you can see that we've got 3 different goals. The first little arrow is the one in literacy, one in mathematics, and then a third one in the college career readiness. And you'll see the specific statute where this is requiring us to do this.
All right.
Go ahead and advance, please. And this is just a reiteration of that document or that component. Go ahead, Mr. Linebarger. This is taken from an HB3 plans goals FAQ that is also on that same website of the HB3 and 30. And so basically this is just saying that the district as well as each campus has to have goals. And so I've highlighted or bolded that last sentence. So with districts that have multiple elementary and or high school campuses, we'll use the district goals and progress measures to set the appropriate goals and targets on each campus. And that's what we will, of course, get them approved. And then we will periodically update you on the progress. You'll go, there you go. So our timeline has changed since HB3 was released, and since COVID, everything's kind of changed and been put on hold. Originally, the timeline was we had to have them adopted prior to the end of this school year. And so our original timeline was during the May board meeting, but because of COVID, the commissioner graciously is allowing us to extend that timeline and have them adopted or get them adopted prior to the first day of instruction beginning for the 2021 school year. And I've bolded and highlighted that. So we started working, and when I say we, just a group within the teaching and learning department started working on these goals and attending some seminars at Region 7 and seeking all the guidance and clarification that we could receive. And so these are the 3 goals that we've been working on. And I say working on, just drafting them, crafting the language. And so you'll see the first one, the % of 3rd grade students that meets grade level or above on STAR reading will increase from 33 to 46% by June of 2024. Then the math is 3rd grade math students will increase from 34% to 47% by June of 2024. And then lastly, the CCMR, which is college career military readiness, will meet the criteria for CCMR data will increase from 51 to 65% in August of 24. And of course, all of the data that we'll look at and we'll know whether or not we met the goals is once we get all of our accountability ratings, we take our STAR assessments, and then of course it's finalized with the release of the taper. So within each of those goals, and then going back to your board operating procedures, there's a page in there on your Lone Star governance, and you'll see some progress measures, if you will. And so under each of those are smaller snippets that we will monitor. So for example, like say the literacy. So the state of Texas requires us to report reading information to the state. And this is something that's reported to you guys it's usually, I think it's in August, whenever we get all of our STAR scores back, we report on literacy goals and how our students did. And usually it's reported in beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. And so we're also required to send some of that information to the state. And so within our reading goal, you will have little measures of when we're going to give certain reading inventories, if you will, or assessments. And it's also broken down by student group, if you will. So right now we have about 7 progress measures under the literacy goal. There are 3 under the CCMR and approximately 7 under the math goal. What we're doing right now with the principals is working through with them and making sure that we have identified the appropriate reading assessments and math assessments that we want to give each year to feed into these goals to see whether or not we are making progress, or more importantly, making sure that our students are making progress.
I want to ask one question, and I know y'all are just starting on this goal development, but one question is, at 60%, why are we sitting at a goal of 46%?
I believe, President Finch, by the time you map it out from 2024 to 2060, and I don't remember the exact increments, I think by 2060, it will get us to the 60%, if that makes
Okay.
sense. What we have to do is we just have to set a 5-year goal. And so, unfortunately, whenever we were originally doing this in January, 2018-19 would count as year 1, if that makes sense. And so before we do this, we're going to need to probably extend the deadline, or not the deadline, the end to probably 2025, if you will.
What's wonderful, President Finch, is with the goals, the way they're set up, we're getting so granular where you get it all the way back to the level of instruction, where it's touching the hands of our kids. Whereas before, if you looked in the past when we set goals, we've set a goal out and it's been kind of lateral to whatever the state is asking campuses to do or a district to do based on their performances. So this is something that is addressing 3 big areas that's identified as a statewide concern. One is the graduation with the college, career, military readiness to that. But understanding that you can't have it without the bookends, which is the early literacy for the young kids. And then you have the computational and math skills that's constantly lagging across. So big 3 areas. But one thing that's exciting is the granular conversations that are happening because at the district level, we're going to look at the goals as more of a summation. But when you back them all the way down to the classroom and the conversations our instructional people are having with our teachers, it's all the way to the granular level with our kids.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'll look forward to hearing more about the performance measures that align with these.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And whenever we do bring those for board adoption, we will absolutely show you all of the increments. And we're still in the process of ironing out, again, the tools that we're going to use specifically for the literacy and the math. And like I said, we started the conversation, it's been about 3 weeks ago with our principals because the state has changed our reading inventories for this next year. And so we were working with them to appropriately select the right ones that they wanted to use. So, yeah. Any other questions? And the other thing that I wanted to bring this to you guys is we will have our district improvement goals, but TEA has allowed us to almost merge the documents, if you will. And so you will see this become a part of our district improvement plan so that we're not working in various facets of goals, if that makes sense. So I was very pleased that they chose literacy, math, and CCMR personally, because that's exactly where our emphasis needs to be. All right. Any other questions regarding this particular component of the agenda? Okay. Now, I do not have a presentation for the department updates, so forgive me for that. So I'll just do a quick run through of everybody that's within the department. And I'm going to go ahead and start with advanced academic, and that's Miss Linda Autry. And so Miss Apt, within the advanced academics department, we have 3 different areas. You have advanced placement, we have dual credit, and then of course we have our STEM Academy. And so Linda has done just a phenomenal job of recruiting students to get in all of those programs, if you will. And so board, if you'll remember back in January of 20, we brought to you some new courses that we wanted to offer this next year at the high school regarding AP. And I'll just give you a brief reminder of those. It was AP Computer Science A, AP Psychology, AP Art History, and then Pre-AP Psychology. And checking the numbers today, those are very healthy numbers of students who are wanting to go into those courses next year. When we're talking about STEM Academy, I asked Ms. Autry how many students we approximately have in STEM Academy. And you remember last year, there were a lot of students. We had a very large cohort, which was fantastic. And so we have about 140 STEM students as of date. About 17 of those will graduate in the next couple of days. And then lastly, our newest cohort that will enter into the 9th grade, it's approximately 30 students. So we're very pleased with the results of that. What I didn't ask is, how COVID affected that, because about the time that COVID happened was the time when we were going into the selection process, if you will. But I know in working with Miss Autry, she went above and beyond working with the students to set up Zoom interviews to make sure that those students were still prepped accordingly to do their interviews and or write their essays. So we're pleased with that. As we move on to student support services, this is one of the largest areas within the teaching and learning department. As a matter of fact, they have about 70 total staff within the student support services. And so that makes up or is combined with Dr. Audrey Young leading as the Director of Student Support Services. And then we have Kayla Hughes, who is our Director of Deaf Education Services. And I'll branch into deaf education in just a moment. But within student support services, and I won't list all of them off for you, but it's where our special education is housed, our dyslexia is housed, any of our diagnosticians, our behavior team, our wonderful social workers, which we're so fortunate to have. We have 6 of those, our licensed specialist in school psychologist or LSSPs, our speech pathologist, our occupational therapist, physical therapy, art facilitators, orientation and mobility, homebound. We're so very fortunate. And, in going through and listening to all of the commissioner calls that we have every Tuesday and Thursday, it's not unfortunate, but they being student support services were never released from any of the federal regulations regarding special education. So they still had to operate under the exact same timelines. And so what they had to do is make a few adjustments, but they were in constant contact with families regarding whether it was behavior, focusing on social emotional aspects. They also built a fantastic website that would really give the parents and the community a lot of different options for social emotional resources and things. They held ARDs and things remotely, whether it was via Zoom or via Google Classroom, so that they made sure that they stayed within those compliance measures. When we move on to the deaf education, which is, we are the fiscal agent for the regional day school program. And there are about, I think it's about 24 districts that we serve outside of Nacogdoches ISD. And so we've got Kayla being, Ms. Hughes being over that particular program as the director. For our areas, or here in Nacogdoches, our centralized classrooms are at Carpenter, McMichael, as well as Nacogdoches High School. And so when we're talking about with our deaf education and how did we support them, they set up Google Classrooms and different sites to provide the resources to their students. And I failed to say you heard Dr. Young talk to us about it last week, about the amount of money they've spent on sending home packets and resources to parents so that they would not be without. So definitely commendable on all of their efforts, especially in staying within all of the compliance, because again, they were never released or get granted waivers like some of us were. So very, very proud of the work that both of those women have done in leading that organization. So fine arts. So fine arts was new to us as far as having a director this past year, and we're so pleased that we had our director, Paulette Tomlinson, join our team. Came to us with a vast array of experiences and opportunities. And so, our main goal for that department was just to provide students with the opportunity to explore their creativity, to develop a lasting love and enjoyment of the arts. And so that particular department is made up of about 36 teachers. And so what we did for this year, for the 1920 school year, is we ensured that all of our elementary students would be, or at least take an art class as well as a music class weekly. And so in the past they had art, but music, I think I said that right. No, it was music, but then we added art. So we're very pleased that we can give those students an opportunity. Ms. Tomlinson wanted to make sure that you guys knew, and I think something went out on our website earlier this year, that Nacogdoches ISD was named a 2020 Best Community for Music Education by the National Association of Music Merchants. And that's something that we have never acquired. So it's well done, well done. And she also said that she expects to be named a Texas Art Education Association District of Distinction soon. So we're gonna keep moving forward with that. So thank you all for allowing us to have a department director for fine arts. Thirdly, I'm gonna move on to CTE. And we have Don Hasley, who has been the director, or who is currently the director of career and technical education. He wanted to make sure that I knew that there is a website, and I will say this to all of them, there is a particular website under the departments for all of these areas that I'm talking with you about. In some instances, they may be still under construction as we continue to explore and add new material to our websites. I read a lot of different information, so forgive me, I have lots of papers in front of me and I don't want to belabor the point. But at our high school, we currently offer 12 different programs of study, and we service about over 1,600 students. And so today I was reading over our comprehensive local needs assessment that was submitted to TEA as part of the Carl Perkins grant funding. And so we're very excited about the information that it's provided. Anytime you do a needs assessment, it's almost like a deficit audit, if you will. It points out the areas that are deficiency, but then it points to particular areas of growth, if you will. And so in looking at it, we've got some areas to improve upon, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. I will say that there is a potential for us to do a CTE audit this next school year, and really looking at and make sure that we are using either our grant funds as well as we should, but I think even more importantly, to expand our CTE opportunities down to the middle school and perhaps generate some additional money. Also, as a part of that January board meeting that we did, where we listed some new courses that we were going to offer at the middle school, and forgive me, I believe it was web communications, but I've lost my piece of paper now, so forgive me, I can circle back to that, but offering up a middle school class. All right, when we move on to Dr. Evelyn Salceda, she is our Director of Bilingual and ESL. So that department serves about 28% of our overall student population, which equates to about 1,769 students. And so within that, you have your LPAC, which is very similar in my mind to special ed regarding the very specific procedures and regulations and rules that you have to follow and very strategic timelines, as well as our bilingual program, whether it's one-way or two-way dual language, as well as our pull-out ESL or English as a second language department. Tell me if there's any questions. Okay.
Did you say, Dr. Hill, did you say that 28% of the students are involved either in the bilingual or programs? Did you say that was 1,760 students?
1,769 students, which equates to about 28% of the total body student population. And I acquired that figure from the TAPER report. That's a report that's usually released about November, December from the state for the previous year. Okay. Yes, sir. So it is a large population for us.
And so how does Evelyn Salceda, as being the director, does she have other employees under her?
She does, yes, sir. She has a biliteracy specialist, a bilingual administrative assistant, which also does our LEP PEAMS. And then she has 7 caseload specific individuals for the LPAC portion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. When we move on and talk about instructional technology, our coordinator for instructional technology is Kirsten Morris. And I always keep it separate in my mind, and I think of what Mr. Owens does for us is he does more of the backbone of the infrastructure side, and where Ms. Morris and her people come along is how do we integrate technology as a tool to enhance what we're currently doing, not as a replacement, but as enhance. And so, of course, she's been very instrumental in building our digital learning website for COVID, offering up all of our resources, instructional resources for our parents. And so she has two instructional technology specialists that work for her. What their department does is attend teacher collaborative planning opportunities, really working with the teachers. It could be one-on-one, modeling lessons to integrate technology, but really digging in and getting a good idea of what the teachers want to accomplish, and then helping the teachers create a plan, and not so much just going in on a one and done teaching, but providing that just in time professional development, but then also going into the classroom and helping them if they need it. They do monthly trainings on their campuses as well. And with us having 3 of them, then they are assigned different campuses, if that makes sense, across the district.
Dr. Hill, if I may interrupt just for a moment, President Finch, I'm going to ask Mr. Martin to quickly share some information, because it dovetails between these 2 departments, between the infrastructure and what we provide for the classroom. Mr. Martin, can you hear me? Do you have some numbers there that you can actually give us as far as teacher iPads, student iPads, Chromebooks, and those kinds of things?
Yes, sir, Dr. Hill. Let me pull that up here.
While he's pulling that up, it's critical to know that, because on the side of what the infrastructure has and what exactly our instructional folks are using, either in the classroom or the students, is very paramount to see that relationship between the 2 and the direction that we need to look at as a district as we start looking and planning forward to meet the needs of our kids and the classroom teachers as well.
Okay, Dr. Hill, President Fitch, currently we have 466 teacher iPads, and this relates to portable devices, this inventory. We have 1,687 student iPads, and we have 2,204 student Chromebooks. Both Ms. Morris, Kirsten Morris, and Mr. Owens have been working in conjunction to research different portable technologies that are out there to address the possibility of having virtual school in the years to come.
So, Dr. Trujillo, my question is, we have a need for how many more iPads to be able to be sufficiently servicing our students in our district?
Well, that's where the big question is, because this is why this relationship with Gasway and Associates will be able to help us, because currently, for instance, I'm sitting in a classroom right now and I'm looking at a computer that's sitting right over there against the wall. But I don't know if that computer has been cleaned out with regards to the malware. So if the teacher were to come back to this classroom and we started school tomorrow and she turned on that machine, what is going to be the repercussions for that? And that's why we want to make sure that we come in and see what exactly do we have that are functioning and be able to meet the needs that we have to get a true number. Because we do have some systems that are in place, but we also want to make sure that we're spending our resources wisely. For instance, we don't need to be investing on desktop technology anymore. Desktop technology kind of ties us down. I'm actually physically in a classroom here at the high school, and I see 3 machines right here in front of me. And these three machines at one time would have served a purpose for us, but we need the portability to put it in the hands of our kids as well as the hands of our teachers. We've asked our teachers to go out and do a lot of the work in this virtual environment. And unfortunately, in my conversations with our staff, some of them are using their own devices because they're devices in the classroom. So to get a true sense of that, that's what we're going to partner up with Gasway and Associates He's going to be able to work hand in hand, not only with our technology side, but also our instructional technology side. He views technology as a pencil. It's a tool that's in the hands of our teachers, in the hands of our kids. It's not to replace the instruction. So we're going to get some really good sound numbers, Mr. Montoya, but without knowing what we have and really the quality of what we have, the machines that we have there in the room, we wouldn't be able to answer that truly right now. I don't want to come in and say, let's replace it with, 1,000 machine systems. And we didn't really do a due diligence in looking at the systems that we do have in place. And also some technologies. Some technology that's out there demands for these little hotspots. Well, in Nacogdoches, a hotspot doesn't meet the need if we don't get good connectivity. So we've got to look at new technologies that we would be able to utilize, that the teachers would be able to utilize, as well as our students. So that's a roundabout way to answer that question. And I didn't really answer it because I don't know the answer. But we definitely are going to get some sound numbers, because like I said, I'm in a classroom, I see 3 systems in here, and I would be afraid to turn them on and hook them up to the network if we're going to, if something is connected, the malware still there that we don't have to, we haven't addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm going to continue on with accountability. Just aware that because of COVID-19, the commissioner basically stated that as a result of not taking our STAR assessments and our end of course STAR assessments, that all districts will be not rated, declared state of disaster for the 1920 school year. So what does that mean for us as a district in our campuses that might have been in needs improvement? That means that those labels will stay, and all of the requirements that we had going into this school year will remain in effect for the 2021 school year. So basically all of our campuses that either received a D or an F overall will either be targeted support and improvement or additional targeted support. And so those improvement plans, not our campus improvement plans, are targeted improvement plans that were required, and we did get them adopted at the beginning of last year. We will be bringing those back to you all this year, of course, with an update, but they will be effective for the 2021 school year.
Dr. Hill, I know a few years ago, we'd gotten a large grant for both Fredonia and Carpenter Elementary. I believe it was a 3-year grant. Are we coming to the end of that?
We are actually, President Fitch, but we just had a TEA phone conference last week, and TEA, like very similar to all the other federal grants, they are extending the timeline for expenditures, if that makes sense. So okay. Mrs. Barbarick was with us. So what we are in the midst of doing is finding out how much of those 2 grants, and yes, ma'am, we call them T-TIPS grants, for both Fredonia and Carpenter, and we are basically figuring out how much was expended and how much is left over. That we can spread out. Now, one of the things that we will have to expend money on is what they call a primary support provider, or PSP, which is from the state. We will have to continue her services. It is a female, her services well into next year. TEA was very specific on giving us the number of hours that we had to use her for, if that makes sense. We don't go beyond those hours, but we'll just finish out that total if that makes, yeah. So yes, ma'am, we do have that. It was I believe it was a 5-year. This was originally our 5th year. And so we had already made plans to sustain some of the practices and policies or procedures that had been put in place to operate without the funds for the 2021 school year. But because all of this happened, they decided to extend the deadline.
Nice.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
And then as Dr. Trujillo and Mr. Martin talked about, as far as, looking at our new virtual world, some of the other things that we're working on, and we have summer learning coming up. And today in the commissioner's call, he has released some additional information for our English language learners, because they have a required 120-hour program that we are mandated to do every year, and that is continued. But they're giving us, meaning the state is giving us, various formats, if you will. And so it can either be brick and mortar or a traditional setting, if you will. with, of course, the stipulations and making sure that we follow all the guidelines from the CDC as well as the governor's executive orders. It could be material or paper-based delivery. It could be a virtual setting, or it could be a hybrid. So I give you those 4 options for us because it all kind of ties into what we've been talking about regarding increasing our, maybe not only our infrastructure, but also our digital tools, and really taking a survey, if you will, of what does our community have? Do they have the digital tools necessary if we did a virtual learning environment for the summer and maybe for the fall? Do they have internet access? Is that something that we need to look at providing? And so we have been working on it's a very rough and draft form survey for both our parents or community and our faculty that will possibly go out soon.
So what I'm hearing you say is that plans for summer school, the decision has not yet been made if that will be a virtual or classroom experience.
You are correct. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We just wanted to go ahead and get the dates out there today, just so that parents and kids will know, as well as teachers and staff. And then I will work very closely with the principals. I've already asked their feedback regarding, should it be mandatory and who should it be mandatory for, as well as just a number of students' names and grade on if they were maybe in danger or they felt as though they haven't been performing instructionally like they should have during this crisis, if you will.
Dr.
So
do you have a number of students that would benefit from summer school or should be in summer school?
So thank you. You said that way better than what I was trying to get out. Yes, sir. That's what I've asked the principals for, is to give me an idea of names and grade levels of students that would benefit from 3 weeks during the summer in July.
I know you guys just announced the date today. Do you have time? It sounds, and I know because of COVID, everything is very much up in the air, but I'm guessing off the top of my head, you're looking at about 6 weeks out. Is that enough time to put these plans into place and have an effective summer school program?
So the good news is we've actually been planning for just a face-to-face summer learning for a while now, if you will. And so we have had our curriculum assistant principals write our summer school curriculum based on our identified essential standards. So we have a curriculum written. We will just need to decide as a group. And we also know too that we're going to have some students who for various health reasons choose not to attend in a face-to-face format, if you will. And so we know that we're going to have to take that into consideration. So the good news is we have a curriculum written. Now it's paper-based right now. And so what does that look like if we need to modify it and turn it into a 100% virtual? Or maybe it's a hybrid. So I guess in short, to answer your question, I believe it will give us enough time. We just have to work, very quickly and diligently to get it done so that it is very strategic and very purposeful and worthwhile. And that will also give us the data for those students moving into the next school year so that we don't, so that we don't start from a blank slate, if that makes sense.
President Finch, what typically the summer program, if you take COVID-19 out of this, summer school had been narrowed down to almost 8 days of instruction. So it really had lost its luster. It to a point, it almost got a little ridiculous with the number, because you have a couple of days to prep your teachers, get them ready for summer school. And then the kids come in and they're there for only 8 days. And it's not really a full week, because it's Fridays are shut down. So you're Monday through Thursday. And they're coming in. The other thing that we have to, and this is why we moved on releasing the date for summer school to begin on July the 6th, is we as an organization and as a district have not had time to come up and catch our breath with what happened just days before COVID-19 hit the district. And it's our technology. And what we want to do is get a grasp of all of that in its entirety. HVAC systems are not at optimal levels now. We have it working on some campuses and others it's not. Same thing with our system. So there's quite a bit of alignment. The commissioner really has charged our teams across the state is to really look at a way to launch our kids into the new academic school year. But they've also complicated it because summer school, and it's been repeatedly stated, is not mandatory. We can identify students, heavily encourage them to attend, but it's not mandatory. Whereas before, we would be able to use that as a leverage to let kids know, because of the Student Success Initiative, they were not going to be able to be promoted to the next grade level. A committee would meet, they would define, and then the kids would wind up either being retained in the grade level. So all of that is out of the mix with it. Also, when you look at curriculum for next year, every one of the areas, pre-kindergarten all the way up through high school, are being asked to really backload a lot of things, to plug in a lot of the deficiencies that kids have, because we will have kids coming into a grade level that will be coming with really loud and screaming deficiencies in the academics. So there's going to be a lot of front loading that's going to happen. There's also the talk of a possibility of some sort of a locally designed assessment that we can come up with, or something that we can use at the state level that we can kind of gauge where the kids are when they hit the door next school year and they're coming in the spring. So looking at a July launch, we can almost with fair certainty really strategically hit some kiddos academically with what they need, and then be able to go into a new school year right after that. Right now, we've got exhaustion at the point with the students, we've got exhaustion with the teachers, and we've got exhaustion with our parents. And so having a little bit of time where we can all just kind of catch our breath. And when we get back, I've told my team, let's get rid of this crisis. We're no longer in a crisis mode. We need to get into the routines of the expectations as Nacogdoches ISD moves forward. And so what we're anticipating is a pretty good process. We might even look at, I know Dr. Hill mentioned a hybrid. Our secondary kids might benefit from a hybrid model, and they don't have to wait until July the 6th. If we have some kids that need to look at some credit recovery and those kinds of things, we could, Dr. Crispo and I were even visiting about that while we were taking breaks between each graduate, is what that may look like as we're addressing the needs from our high school kids. But we definitely need to do something with our primary kiddos, our littles, from our pre-kindergarten all the way up through 6th grade, and try to get them ready to go for the academic school year. But yeah, in years past, it's been kind of 8 days. I mean, we've had 10 days, but it's a unique situation when we look at launching for this next school year.
I agree.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. I'm sorry.
Sure. No. Are there any other questions for me?
It's not a question, but I was going to remind everyone, Ms. Audrey's program, the Student Support Services.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, she lost a wonderful, wonderful human being during this COVID. I'm not sure what was the cause, and Miss Bridget Power passed away. She was, I worked with her for many, many years. She took care of those special needs students with much love. Personally, if you knew her, I mean, you would be a little bit emotional.
Yes, sir.
She was a wonderful human being.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for that.
Any additional questions for Dr. Hill before we move on? All right. And Dr. Hill, does that conclude your report? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to the next item, which is business office. The school board's role in adopting a budget is an ongoing activity, and the superintendent and staff work together to develop the district budget and present it to the board for approval. And Ms. Barbrick, the floor is yours to explain that process a little bit in more detail.
Good evening, President Fitch, board members, Superintendent Dr. Trujillo. I want to stress that the budget is a living document, and every month we bring amendments to the board for approval. The PowerPoint that I have for you today is just for talking points. what I want you to pay more attention to is the handouts that are in your board packet. So the first page is the 2021 budget calendar. And like the budget, the calendar is a fluid document and can change depending on circumstances. This year, we've had a perfect storm in developing our budget. We had our computer virus, and then we had the COVID virus. This has caused major delays, and we haven't been able to follow our traditional calendar. Last year, we had another circumstance that caused us to have a delay, and that was the legislation. They were very delayed in their adoption of HB3, and so we did not know how to move forward until the very end of May. So when you don't have all your information, it's hard to plan your budget. But as you can see on page 1, we have a lot of to be determined because we're just sort of having to work as we go. And I've checked off certain items that we have done. And obviously we have not had any budget workshops, knowing that, oh, you went too far in, we're still on page 1. With salaries running 75 to 80% of our budget, it's hard to move forward until you know what your salaries are going to be. We've had a TASB salary study this year, and it was just presented the other day on May 22nd. We have had changes in our funding, which will affect what we can afford. And so we have a lot of information to go through before we can adopt a salary schedule or a compensation plan. The plan so far this year is we are going to bring to you a very basic budget, basically mirroring prior year. And then as we find out more information, what next year will look like, what our student population may look like, we will bring a large amendment to you to mirror more of the needs that we will have for next year. So if you look at the responsibility column, you can see that there are many stakeholders in building the budget. You have the district administration that plays an important role, as well as campus leadership. You have the board members that play an important role, and then also directors, and then also reaching down, your community can have they don't have a say, but they can, when campuses are developing their campus improvement plan, they have community members as part of that committee, and that can drive a big portion, your state comp ed portion of your budget. So moving to page 2, that was the last time that we, it's the 2018-19 budget calendar, and that was the last time we were able to really follow the more traditional calendar where we had budget workshops along the way. All right, so moving to page 3. You can advance the slide. The board adopts the budget at the function level. The function is the purpose of the expense. And so examples include instruction or campus leadership or maintenance and operations. And what you see on page 3 through 11 is what was adopted for the 2019-20 school year. There are many pages to this budget. It's just for informational purposes. I'm not going to go through it and explain the budget. But I wanted you to see that the board does adopt on a function level only. The following pages are different perspectives of the same budget, and those are published on our website. But again, page 1 is what the board adopts the budget at. All right, so I would like to move on to page 12. So part of the budget adoption is calculating the tax rate. So House Bill 3 required that all school districts lower their tax rates. So before, our tax rate for M&O, maintenance and operations, was $1.17. And now it will be compressed over several years. So the 1920, the school year we're in right now, it was lowered to 1.0683. And that will also have to be calculated again for the 2021 year and going forward. So what's thrown a wrench into this is, in the past, we calculated our tax rate based on prior year property values. With House Bill 3, we now have to use current year values. And those current year values won't be known in its entirety until June or July. And then we have to calculate it. TEA will actually calculate our tax rate. So on page, this is page 12 and 13, this is using the Equity Center template to determine the tax rate. And then page 13 is using the template that Omar Garcia develops to calculate this rate. But what I want you to notice is on page 13, at the very bottom, I would like to read this note to you. It says, see warning above, because House Bill 3 mandates that all Tier 3 compressed tax rates be within 90% of each other. No rate can be more than 10% different than any other rate. And because comptroller property value data will not be available when you have to set your tax rate, now that we have switched to using current year values, TEA is going to use April 30th CAD values as the basis for calculating your Tier 1 compressed rate. Since your max TRE rate is simply your Tier 1 compressed rate plus 17 cents, the max rates shown here are not the official max rates. The official rates will be the Tier 1 compressed rate TEA calculates plus 17 cents. So you won't know your max rate until after TEA calculates it, reportedly sometime in the June-July timeframe. So that last sentence was what I really wanted to stress to you, is that in many ways we are going into this blind because we're guesstimating right now. The budget is always a guesstimate, but it just seems to be coming more and more that way as new laws are passed for us.
What was the reasoning, Lisa, to switch to the current year values versus prior years? Isn't that's what's causing the crunch, isn't it?
Well, yes, that's part of it. Yes, and you know what? I really don't know why that is. I can't answer that. That was something that was made at the legislative level.
But you haven't heard anything.
I'm sorry, what?
In your CFO circles about the reason. Okay.
No, I have not. All right, so moving on to page 16, we have a copy of our certified tax values for the 1920 school year. And then the following page, so page 17 is where the actual values are, and then page 18 are the new values for our current year, the estimated values. And you'll notice that we have a drop in our mineral values. They are pretty significant. The drop is 45,199,723. I'm sure you're all aware that oil has dropped dramatically, and that's how it is affecting us. Going on, can you move on to the next slide, please? So normally when I do the tax collection projection, we use these certified values along with our tax rate, and we historically we collect 97% of our taxes, and so I base that our calculation using a 97% collection rate. With the current economic conditions, I'm using 96% this year. We're trying to be very conservative in going into the unknown future. So this ends up being close to $1 million cut in our budget. So page 19 is the calculation for our tax rate. Again, I don't want to go through this. It's just, these are just showing you there's many, many steps to developing a budget, many facets, and a lot of unknown information. So before, oh, I also wanted to point out that, you know, we've had the COVID-19 viruses and we've had, we've been given a reprieve on many areas, but one of those is not in the budget. We still have to adopt our budget by June 30th. That has not been waived. We still have to go through our audit. That has not been waived. So the business office has pretty much been in full mode through this virus. Our bills still have to be paid. Our employees still have to be paid. So although they've been working primarily from home, they have not stopped. And so I want to give kudos to the business office for tirelessly working through this all. So before I move on, do you have any questions on the budget? I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the departments I'm over, which won't take very long, but do you have any questions on the budget?
I just had a quick question.
Okay.
If I heard you correctly, what you're saying is that even though you're developing a budget, it's not necessarily the budget that we're going to be able to follow. Is that correct or no?
You will adopt a budget, you will vote on a budget, but it will be a basic budget. It won't take everything that we need to into account for next year. Some things that we're going to have to think about is, again, devices. What kind of devices are we going to buy for our campuses? Last year, or this year, you adopted a budget to replace 50% of our teacher computers, but those were desktops. So this next year was going to be the other 50%, and we need to revisit that. And what kind of devices are we going to buy? Another thing we need to look at, the biggest thing we need to look at is our salaries. With House Bill 3, if you have an increase in funding, you have to pass that increase on to your teachers, a certain percentage. And how they calculate that increase isn't necessarily meaning an overall increase to your budget, but whether your state funding versus your tax dollars are in. So if our certified values continue to remain low, we may not have any increase to pass on to those teachers. But we still want to value our teachers and look at what we can do.
Mr. Montoya, also, some of the things that we're looking at is everything was tied to the property value. We're looking at the census block. The census block is a big portion of this budget plan that's being talked about. And unfortunately, that COVID-19 has also thrown a wrench into that process, because there's a certain amount of pennies based on a zip code. So depending on how many zip codes we have within our community, there are also a census block. So if a student lives in this one area, then that's basically, there's a formula that also gives you the amount of funding based on zip code. And that's not just here, that's across the state.
Oh, yes.
Part
yes.
of this new formula that we have is a census block. But in order for a census block to really do its due diligence, because we'll be locked into it for the next 10 years, this last census was very critical for the communication that we have. There are a few things that are out there that I know that she's right on top of, and that's with the CARES Act when it comes to the ESSER funds and the ESSER funds that are there, the relief fund, any additional expenditures that's been asked by some of the board members. For instance, all of these hand sanitizing equipment and all that, some of that can be paid through the janitorial supplies can come out of the FEMA fund that's there. So while we're balancing and the budget, we're also looking at funding sources that have been put in place to kind of offset the expenditures that we've had to accrue based on this COVID-19.
Right.
So there's things that are there as well.
Right. Also, TEA all along has been saying that our funding would remain whole, even though our students did not return after spring break. Well, now what we have learned is there is a grant out there. It's called, I believe, the ESSER grant, and it is based on our SCE count, our state comp ed count. That will be used in place of some of our regular state funding to keep us whole. So although we are going to get a grant of $2.5 million, that's one of the grants we will get, that will replace some of our state funding that we will not get. So as a whole, you can look at that and say, oh, we have three grants. We have the FEMA grant, we have the ESSER grant, and we have the, I can't remember what it's called. It's another grant. One of those grants really is replacing other funds. And a lot of this will be discussed at our budget workshop. I know this is primarily as a new board orientation showing how we develop the budget. So I don't know if we want to really get into that much as that now or not. I mean, I'm definitely.
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget before I move on? Okay. I just want to let you know that I am also have the student nutrition under me. Robin Thacker is our director, and she does a great job of keeping our students fed and keeping us up to date on what's required of us. And she was also instrumental in getting us the community eligibility provision, which allows all students to eat free. We qualify for this program because we are such a large, a lower economic school district. So we qualify for this program, and it's been great. During the pandemic, school closure, student nutrition continued to work, and they fed around 1,200 to 13 students per day. So they had to come in early in the morning, prepare the meals, and then pass them out to parents, and then clean up. And then they would start over again the next day. So again, this is another department that never closed. They just continued to work very hard, and they were at a very high risk because they were face to face with the community and passing out these lunches. Another department I have is the PEIMS department. PEIMS stands for the Public Education Information Management System. Kay Luna is the coordinator for this department. And it is the reporting mechanism for all areas of school district functions. So we definitely have Big Brother watching over us. TEA collects all kinds of information, and it's all through the PEAMS reporting function. So they collect information on attendance, budget, actual expenditures, as well as our audit, teacher data, which includes their degree, their gender, their race, their amount of experience. They collect all kinds of student data to include their grade level, gender, race, performance, special programs. If we have information, it's relayed on to the TEA. There's several times a year that we provide TEA with a different part of this reporting. So one of the biggest things is our snapshot, which happens in October. We collect our enrollment data, and that's passed on to TEA, but that also drives a lot of our federal funding. So PEAMS is very critical in that you have employees that can do data entry that is very accurate. If you have something that's not checked, that can have a huge impact on your funding. You know, if you don't have a course that is checked as being CTE, well, then you lose out on your CTE, that CTE funding. So this is, again, I want to say very critical, very time sensitive, and getting correct and accurate and information to TEA, which drives our funding and our ratings, accountability ratings. And so these people are very valued employees, and I'm happy to be over this department. So as you can see, the team, the business office team, PEAMS team, we touch all areas of the district. We need to be well-rounded in our education policy, board policy, campus improvement plans and district improvement plans, district goals. We also need to know about fair labor laws. We need to know governmental accounting standards, as well as generally accepted accounting standards. We need to know the provisions of grants. And so although we only have 10 employees, we provide a big bang of services to the district.
Absolutely. And we appreciate that. Do I hear any questions for Mrs. Barber? 2 more sections to cover out of the 5, and I think that those will both go quickly. I'm going to kick it right now. Communication and media relations. Board members are the link between the school system and the public. Our role is to engage the community in a way that promotes continued constructive discussion and generate positive community interest. And I've asked Mr. Linebarger to just kind of update us a little bit briefly, if you don't mind, Les, on our communication and media relations plan.
Thank you, Ms. Fitch. Let me, give me just a moment here. Let me get something pulled up. For the most part, we use 3 different facets to communicate with the community, depending on who our target audience is. Some of the general ways we use to communicate is through our website, and also through social media. So what we use with social media for a lot of times is to try to funnel viewers to our website so they can see the particular information there. We also use some more direct things, especially with our parents of our students. We have a software service we use called School Messenger. And when you get those recorded messages from me, that's when we're using School Messenger. A lot of times we use that. If this had been a regular spring semester, last week you would have got a phone call from me, a recorded phone call from me saying, hey, school is going to be out of session on Monday, Memorial Day. That'll be a student holiday and a staff holiday. And we'll return to class on Tuesday, May 26th. Or you would probably be getting one from me today or tomorrow that would have said Thursday, May 28th, the last day of school, is an early release date. So be looking for your child home earlier than normal. We also work obviously with the media that cover our school district, which for the most part is the Daily Sentinel, the newspaper, and East Texas television stations. And I communicate with them regularly, perhaps more than they want to hear from time to time, because if we do something or have something to announce, I send them a press release as well. And many times that press release will look fairly similar to what might appear on our website. We also aid from time to time. Did somebody say something? Okay, sorry about that. From time to time, we aid with internal district communications, getting information to our staff. That a lot of times that's a lot easier to do because we can reach so many people with their NAC ISD email address. And so if there's things that need to be shared with the district staff, we will use that method to reach out to them. Ms. Fitch, is there anything else I can cover for you?
All right. Does anybody have any questions regarding the communication and media efforts? All right. That's going to take us to the last point of our 5 responsibilities, and that is hiring the superintendent and superintendent evaluation. Obviously, that's extremely important. The board must develop superintendent performance goals and evaluate his or her progress toward those goals. Of course, we're excited to have a new superintendent, Dr. Gabriel Trujillo, on board with us. And our team of 1, as we discussed earlier with Dr. Hill, will be working in the next few months together to establish district goals. And as part of that process, we'll adopt performance measures, and all of this will tie into the process of an annual performance evaluation for the superintendent. So that's we don't have anything definitive to show tonight in that regard, because it's that development process and it all ties together neatly in a package. Do any of the board members have any questions about that process at this point? No, we will be talking about it a lot in the coming weeks. All right. I want to now kick it to Dr. Trujillo to make any comments or thoughts that he would like to share with us before we close out our night.
Well, first and foremost, let me let each and every one of y'all know how much it means to these graduates to be coming up here across the stage. It's to seeing the smiles and the parents that are here. It's all about each one of them. We've been averaging every single day about 60 graduates. And so we hear pop in circumstance 60 times, which is okay, because you know what? It's only the first time and the only time for each graduate. And that's what makes it special. So when we go home at the end of the day, even though our feet are heavy and our hands are hurting because we've been applauding like crazy, celebrating each one of our graduates, it's been amazing watching their faces as they're coming across and watching our parents. So I'm so elated and I'm so proud of each one of them. The other thing that I want to make sure, and I didn't know, I came into this late, Dr. G was with me up here this afternoon as we wrapped it up, and I see him in there now with us. But I didn't know if y'all started off with Holly, how much she is an asset to this team of 1. And I want to make certain that we recognize that with the work and the efforts that she brings to us in helping us kind of navigate this together so that we truly are a team of 1. Today's goal in visiting with Ms. Finch was, this is just like the board is a team of one, I'm also mirroring that with a team of one with my cabinet. And I hope you can see the expertise of each one of these individuals and the people that they are charged to lead. They're doing an amazing job working with their groups that are there. We're going to be streamlining some things, absolutely, so that we can work much more efficiently. But I will tell you, a team of one on both sides, it's a pleasure for myself to be working with this one board group and one charge, one mission, one direction, but also working with this one cabinet of very capable individuals that are looking out for the best interest of our students here in Nacogdoches. And I got to meet some graduates that have traveled from Cushing, from different towns around us, that parents have selected them to come to Nacogdoches. And that's exciting to see them walk across that stage and listen to a board member recruit the next generations as they're walking across and saying, "Are you future dragons?" And the kids are shaking their head, "Yes, we are future dragons." So thank you, Ms. Finch, for this opportunity to showcase this amazing cabinet that greeted me as I came into the district, but also for this amazing board that has come and stood and celebrated with these graduates and heard these time after time and time, the pomp and circumstance and the smiles and the tears. And it's just exciting. And I thank the good Lord for good weather, because we've not had, that torrential rain they keep talking about. I may be taking it too soon to say that, but we haven't had it so that our families can move from the vehicle and into this celebration and go right back out. So thank you all so much for allowing this group to come in and kind of orient Ms. Apt to what we've been looking, but also orient all of us to really remind us what's most important. And that's the little ones, the kids that we're here to serve each and every day. So I feel blessed to be here, and I celebrate every single day that this is a great thing for all of us. So
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo.
Thank you.
And of course, I want to give Leah Beth any opportunity to ask questions, but also the rest of the board. I know every time I go through an orientation, I learn new things. So if there's anything, this will be one last chance. If we've got any questions regarding these 5 pillars of board responsibility. All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mindy?
This is Mindy Winslow, and I move that we adjourn.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Winslow. Do we hear a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Nairmond. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Hearing none, motion is unanimous. Thank you all so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.